am Pocho Salcedo. Greetings to our viewers, content distributors, TV stations in Latin America, and those tuning in from coast to coast across the continental United States and Hawaii. Here in New York, we are ready to decode the stories that shape our world. This is not just the news, this is the DNA of the news. Russian President Vladimir Putin visited Pyongyang in early 2024, signing a defense pact with North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un to secure new allies and bolster Russia's munition supply for the Ukrainian war. This agreement includes a mutual defense accord and North Korea's full support for Putin's invasion. What are the implications of this pact and renewed alliance? How is China reacting to this Russia and North Korea development? What does it mean for North Korea and nuclear ambitions? How does it affect the security concern of South Korea, Japan, the United States, and other regional allies? We have an expert here to dissect this very complex situation. Dan White, welcome to the DNA of the news.
Juan Carlos, it's great to be here.
Daniel White holds master's degrees from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, SAIS, the Naval Postgraduate School, and the University of Washington, and a bachelor's degree from the University of Central Florida. Dan is a former U.S. Army officer and veteran of the Afghanistan War. He is a program manager, strategist, writer, and expert researcher with 12 years of experience in military, public, and foreign policy.
Well, Dan, to understand where we are today and this newly displayed friendship between Russia and North Korea and the recently signed Russian-North Korean defense agreement, please tell us a little bit about Kim Jong-Un in the years following the failed discussions with the U.S. under the Trump administration.
So, in the years since the failed negotiations with the Trump administration, North Korea basically went into lockdown with COVID, and that pretty much shielded North Korea off to the world until about August of 2022. And during that time period, North Korea accelerated its missile testing, and then you see kind of this period in which North Korea and Russia begin their outreach to one another.
And why did Russia rekindle its relationship with North Korea and sign this mutual defense agreement? Despite the difficult circumstances, there is, I don't think, a belief in Moscow that an alliance with North Korea could turn the tide of the Ukrainian-Russian war. Even Pyongyang continues to supply Russia with much-needed ammunition and weapons. What other technology or military resources can Moscow get from North Korea to win its war, which is supported against pretty powerful weaponry from the U.S. and European countries?
Well, so a few things. Russia is, been fairly isolated since the war began. So it already has a limited number of partners it can deal with. And North Korea just happens to have a lot of some shared interests that Russia can tap into, along with a previous history of cooperation dating back to the Cold War and, relatively warm ties with Moscow through the 1990s to the present. So Russia reached out to North Korea in part because it's in need of partners, but also North Korea has a lot of less sophisticated military hardware, such as artillery shells and missiles that are of value to Russia, because Russia, since the war has kicked off, has kind of plateaued in its military industrial capability because it has a labor shortage that's been exacerbated by the war. So Russia can only make so many artillery shells, so many missiles, and North Korea provides a supplement to that. And North Korea thus far has provided somewhere between 2 and 5 million artillery shells to Russia. And that Just to give an idea, Russia produces 2.5 to 3 million artillery shells per year as it is. So that gives Russia a lot more flexibility to continue to prosecute the war in the way that it wants to without having to make other more painful trade-offs. So in addition to having the material, it's also cheaper to produce in North Korea as well. So looking at ballistic missiles, it's something that Russia can produce at home, but it can also get from North Korea at a fraction of the price. And North Korea is happy to accept the money from Russia. So part of this relationship was formed not because it is Russia's choice of any country to be its partner. It's partly due to this convergence of need and long-term strategy of Russia trying to balance against the West, so NATO, but also to provide it with additional options for remaining independent and less dependent on countries like China as well.
You just mentioned China. China has this no limits agreement partnership with the Soviet Union, but maybe some components to guide the missiles or things of that sort. And so Russia goes to North Korea. Are there any risks for Russia getting too close to one of China's historic client states?
So this is a very interesting situation. There's been good reasons why Russia has tried to maintain both a relatively equidistant partnership between North Korea and South Korea, so it could serve as kind of a arbiter between the two parties to maintain stability on the Korean Peninsula, but also to avoid plunging too far into China's backyard. So this presents some interesting complications for Russia that it has to deal with over the long term. But also North Korea feels very similarly, in some cases, to Russia, I would imagine. North Korea doesn't want to be hemmed in by having a single strategic partner, which is China. North Korea's entire governing philosophy has been one of self-reliance. So having Russia step in as a potential balancing power against China provides it with additional flexibility to pursue an independent foreign policy and to avoid having to bow down to sanctions or pressure that the U.S. may exert on China to rein in North Korea on certain things. So it gives both parties additional flexibility in dealing with both the West, but also in dealing with China as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out because China is also in a very difficult position now too, because China has committed itself to supporting Russia. It also has this very long history of North Korea being its little brother. China's leaders often refer to North Korea and China's relationship as being lips and teeth. And North Korea doesn't necessarily want to be the hemmed in, just strictly following in China's lead going into the future.
And there's been an impact everywhere. One of the closest neighbors of North Korea, of course, South Korea. And Seoul has been one of the world's top arms exporters, has signed billions of dollars of deals to sell tanks and other weaponry to European countries, including Kyiv's ally Poland. But Seoul had this policy, long-standing policy, not to sell weapons into active conflict zones. Right away after this agreement between Russia and North Korea, they decided to take a second look at it.
Absolutely. And this is a time when South Korea is more confrontational towards North Korea as well. The previous Moon administration had more of an attitude of reconciliation with North Korea, while the Yoon administration that is currently in power has pursued a more confrontational approach. So it's really going to push South Korea to push back aggressively against North Korea, and also to ensure that there's some kind of reciprocal response that makes Russia think hard about how far it wants to go into this partnership with North Korea.
And also there is this other talk, which is becoming more intense in South Korea, about the possibility of developing their own domestic nuclear weapons program, or to revisit the redeployment of U.S. tactical nuclear weapons on its territory. So there's a lot of complexity going on in South Korea at this point.
Absolutely. This is going to add to conversations about what the relationship with the United States is going to be in terms of deterring North Korea as its nuclear capabilities increase. Because we're coming to the time when North Korea's nuclear program and its missile program is becoming sufficiently robust that it may be able to reliably penetrate U.S. Missile defenses. So that would place strain on the existing, partnership between the U.S. and Korea, in that it becomes more questionable whether the United States wants to trade American cities for defending South Korea against a much more powerful nuclear North Korea if it comes down to it. So there's going to be a lot of look at how this partnership can be reassuring to South Korea that the United States is going to be there, and also is enough to deter North Korea from acting more aggressively in the future. Because as North Korea advances its nuclear program, it's likely that North Korea may feel sufficiently emboldened to take somewhat more aggressive action short of war, but still potentially escalatory towards South Korea and toward the United States. So Russia may see this as an opportunity to try to drive a wedge between South Korea and the U.S., given that the United States' general philosophy has been one of non-proliferation. So we don't want even our allies to get their own nuclear capabilities, because in general, it makes the world a less safe place to have more states who are armed with nuclear weapons. So they're going to see how they can kind of intensify these questions of whether whether South Korea wants its own missile program, or whether the United States is going to feel comfortable defending South Korea in the future. So some of the policies that Russia may pursue in the future may be to try to gin up that uncertainty.
We'll take a short break and we will be right back. We're back with Don White from the Wilson Center Kennan Institute. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Dan, we mentioned before that China had signed a pretty strong agreement with Russia, but China has been always concerned about the weakening of the relationship with Pyongyang. And even before Putin even announced he was going to North Korea, he sent one of his top officials to reassure North Korea that Beijing was still a strong ally. The Kremlin is also aware that Beijing's greatest fears is that a renegade North Korea might one day point its weapons to China. So how is this whole new relationship between Russia and North Korea impacting China?
So it is very interesting, because we do see that now Russia is creating this partnership in part because it's trying to reduce its dependence on China as an ally. So it's trying to create these partnerships, and North Korea is only one of them. Russia has also reached out to other rivals and former adversaries of China, such as India and Vietnam, to kind of create a constellation of different states it can use to ensure that it has freedom of maneuver for the future and is able to have additional partners other than just falling into sort of a vassal-like position with China. So Russia, although it has this no limits partnership with China, is also aware that China is a country that sits right on its border, has claims on Russian territory that have even recently been revived with the release of new Chinese maps that claim certain fairly insignificant parts of Russian territory, but claims nonetheless, and the country with which Russia had its most bloody recent border clash. So Russia is aware that it's trying to use the available partnerships it can get from China, North Korea, India, Vietnam, because it has different interests in different areas of the world. So it's trying to leverage what resources it can in order to make a difference in Ukraine, but also it is planning for the long term and the future that may include fighting for its political independence from China. So North Korea has similar interests in mind of trying to remain independent of China as China continues to grow and continues to more assertively or more aggressively assert its claims in East Asia. And North Korea is going to want to make sure it has the flexibility to avoid being pinned down by China and have its future dictated to it. So I think in general, yes, it's a dangerous game, but China also doesn't have as much flexibility as we would like to believe for its power as well. It's committed itself to Russia. It doesn't want to see Russia collapse in Ukraine, so it's difficult for them to just pull the support that is given to them so far. It also doesn't want to push on North Korea any more than it has to, because then North Korea will just continue to fall into Russia's lap. So it's in a place right now where I imagine it still hasn't figured out what it wants to do. So it has not exactly great options for publicly displaying its displeasure, but you may see some cases in which China more subtly shows North Korea that it doesn't appreciate that it's kind of falling too much into Russia's hands. So you may see more North Korean workers expelled from China, hold up of some trade. So different things that may subtly show that China is trying to pressure North Korea into placing limits on the partnership that it has there.
Historically, Russia has been a European-centered nation, but after the events in Ukraine and the European reaction, is Russia only real option, what you're saying, to be Asian-centered now? Given its economy in size compared to China, for example, it's 9 times smaller. Is Russia destined to be the junior partner in this relationship and will have another choice but Asia?
So this is actually something that has been a part of Russian history for a long time. You have the Westernizers versus the Slavicists versus the Eurasianists, people who believe that Russia has more to gain by pursuing a Western or an Eastern, Southern foreign policy. I think we're going to see the limits of Russia's Asia centered or Asia basically only foreign policy, because it's going to basically limit Russia's competitiveness in the future, as Russia still needs to get it still needs markets for its natural resources, and it's lost a significant part of that in Europe. So although it can offer China and India these things, there's still going to be an inherent ceiling on the revenue it can gain from that. And it's also missing out on important imports from Europe that it previously getting in terms of high technology items. And when we talk about its Asian-centric strategy, you also have countries like Japan and South Korea and Taiwan, which are major economies in Asia that are, not going to do business with Russia in the future, given its course of action as it continues to pursue closer ties with its own, with their adversaries. So Russia is going to find that it's going to have its own options a bit more limited, just being limited to Asia. So strategically, yes, it gives them some options for avoiding pressure from the sanctions regime, from NATO, from the EU, from the United States and other powers. But over the long term, it's going to inhibit Russia's growth, and it's going to inhibit Russia's future. So at some point, we're likely going to have a lot of voices that are questioning the wisdom of pursuing too close of ties with China, who's likely to be Russia's future rival in a lot of ways.
Well, thank you very much. And let's focus a little bit on the United States, on Japan, on Australia, and countries like that. It would appear that North Korea's long-term goal is Kim Jong-un's interest in advancing telemetry, nuclear submarine technology, more sophisticated ICBM abilities, which will be a threat to the international community at large, and how this relationship with Russia would facilitate that, or it would not.
So right now, this is just the beginning of kind of the concerns as to whether Russia will be providing advanced technologies to North Korea. We still don't exactly know the full extent of the technology that Russia is willing to give North Korea at this point. But we know that North Korea is going to want more than food for all the military assistance that is providing Russia. So we're still watching for signals that indicate exactly what Russia may be helping North Korea with. And I think there's a couple indicators that are relevant to the question of advanced technology, missile guidance, etc. So Russia has been firing somewhere between 20 and 50 ballistic missiles that were made in North Korea so far in the war since December, when Russia started importing these Hwasong-11 short-range ballistic missiles. And, 50 ballistic missiles is not going to be something that changes the tide on the battlefield, but it's enough for North Korea to get feedback on its weapons systems. So North Korea has been firing a lot of these in a contained environment into the ocean. This is a chance for it to refine its products and for Russia to help them to do that. So that's one. Another is with satellite development. Putin previously discussed his interest in helping North Korea last year at the Vosnochi Cosmodrome, assisting North Korea in development in space and in rocketry. And we have seen potentially some indicators that Russia has helped North Korea with its space program. In May, there was another attempted launch of a North Korean satellite. The satellite failed, but it was notable because there appeared to be a different type of engine that was used in the rocket, allegedly, which featured low oxygen kerosene propellant, which is only notable because that happens to be the type of propellant that is used in Russian satellite launches and had not been used previously in North Korea. So that is kind of a second indicator that maybe North Korea is getting some technical assistance or parts from Russia in that regard. And the third, I think, is this most recent missile test by North Korea in June when Putin was visiting. And that was a test of a missile that featured MIRVs, so independently targeted reentry vehicles. So the idea that one missile has many miniaturized nuclear warheads. So this is, a fairly complex piece of technology. It's something that Russia has mastered over a long period of time. And it's something that North Korea has expressed wanting to develop for several years now. So the question is, why would you kind of do this kind of test when Putin is visiting your country? And I think, these are all hints that Russia has been involved in advancing North Korea's missile program.
Then, in the last minute that we have, what is that one thing that we should be paying attention to understand the major developments coming up in that region?
So that's a good question. Right now, I would say continue to look at the developments in terms of North Korea's missile program. It will be interesting to see what future tests of missiles and satellites are coming in the future, whether they're successful, what technology they feature, what factories that Kim Jong-Un tries to visit, because a lot of these provide insights into the things that they're building, the things that they want to emphasize. Like I said, in previous visits with Putin, you see these hints of where the cooperation is between the two regimes. So I would continue to look at future visits by Russian officials to North Korea and vice versa, and also to keep an eye on future weapons tests by North Korea as well.
Dan, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show. I hope you come back sometime in the near future again. And thank you for your time and for your expertise.
Well, Carlos, it's been great to be here and talk to you.